Welcome to Top Line, the podcast for the best founders, operators, and investors in B2B tech. Every week, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, will break down what's important for you to know to be the most well-informed professionals in the market.
This episode is brought to you by Attio, the AI-native CRM built for the next era of companies. Connect your email, and Attio instantly builds your CRM right before your eyes with every company, every contact, and every interaction you've ever had, enriched and organized. With Attio, you can build AI-powered automations and use its research agents to tackle complex operational processes, like finding key decision-makers and triaging incoming leads. Join industry leaders like Flatfile, Replicate, Modal, and more. Just head to attio.com/topline and you'll get 15% off your first year. That's attio.com/topline for 15% off your first year. Now back to the show.
Hello, everyone. It's Top Line, the podcast, not the newsletter, and not the other thing. This is our 108th episode. It's AJ Bruno, CEO of Quota, Asad Zaman, CEO of Sales Talent Agency. I'm Sam Jacobs, the CEO of Pavilion, and we're joined by a very special guest and a dear friend, Mr. Guy Rubin, the founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO of a company called Ebsta, which is one of the leading revenue intelligence platforms in the world. And they regularly ingest petabytes of data around what's happening in the go-to-market ecosystem. And we typically commission an annual benchmarking report with Ebsta that has really cutting-edge insights on what's happening in the go-to-market world. So, Guy, we're really excited to have you with us.
Thank you, Sam. It's a real pleasure to finally make it to the podcast. I feel honored.
How many zeros are in heta or whatever, hetabytes? That's a lot.
I mean, I made up the petabytes thing, but it's...
Oh, you said petabytes. I thought you said hetabytes. I thought you really made it up that time. I was like, I don't think that's a word, but here we are.
Guy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Lovely to be joining you guys. We're in that funny period of in London where one day it's hot, the next day it's cold. So still waiting for summer to kick in, but we just had a bank holiday. So lovely to be back at work.
What was the bank holiday? Yeah. Which one?
May Day bank holiday. We any excuse over here to take a day off. So we had a long weekend.
I think all of Europe had May 1st as a day off, and maybe even May 2nd.
Did you, Sam?
I did, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
We drove from Barcelona to Nice, 7 hours, and quite lovely, actually. I'm at A9.
That sounds like a great drive.
Were you affected by the power cuts in Spain, Sam?
I was affected. It was there's something beautiful about not having power, knowing nobody has power. The cell phone's not working. It's obviously scary if it lasted longer, but as it was, we just went to the beach. You know, there's nothing I can do. I cannot do work right now. I live in the cloud. If the cloud is down, then I have nothing to contribute to society, and I shall read my book.
That's
Starlink
great.
stayed up. So anyone who had Starlink in Europe was still online. But there were some really beautiful videos on Instagram and other social networks about what people did in Barcelona when the lights went off. Everybody went on the streets. They were dancing, drinking, having a jolly good time. Seemed like a good thing.
I was we had a jolly good time over here, the three of us.
One of our largest customers was heading to Spain from the US and via London, and got stranded in London, and we ended up having a lovely meal together. So we ended up, it all worked out in the end. And,
Guy, before we get into the episode, which Asad will guide, a bit of personal questions. Are you in London tomorrow? Because I'm going to be there tomorrow and then Thursday for the Charge Beat Believe.
More value for the audience here.
If anyone wants to join Sam, 4 days ago from when you were listening to this on Sunday
we went through
evening.
London to other Spain's power cuts, and now
we just lost
dinner.
All the listeners. We're failing. They're so upset with us. We have not gained a single YouTube follower from my series.
Not from this.
Yes, I'll be here, and it'll be lovely to see you, Sam.
All right, great. All right, thank you very much, everybody else. Sorry you missed us. That was 4 to 7 days ago, depending on when you're listening.
You should ask these two how their dinner went.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Back to you, Asad.
Okay, so Guy, we're here to talk about this brilliant report that you guys put out every year. And the place I wanted to start with was around sales reps and quota attainment. So one of the data points in there that was interesting was 78% of sales reps have missed their quotas in 2025 so far. That's up from 69% in 2024. There was another data point, which is 14% of reps drove 80% of the revenue across the companies that you guys are tracking. When I think about AI, one of the promises of AI is that it'll help make building things easier. And you can already see signals of that. So if that's the case, there'll be more companies that are being created every quarter. Right now, there's 7% more companies every quarter. That might become 10%. And so that increases competition for all of us. It becomes a noisier market amplified with AI tools that also drive noise. And then if that's the case, if there are more companies, all of them will need sellers. So that demand for sellers increases. But it seems like there are actually not a lot of really good sellers out there, according to your data. So what's going to play out as this need for and demand for great sellers increases? But what we're dealing with right now, based on your data, is a market that has very few of those people already, not enough to go around.
Okay, well, there's a lot there to unpack. So why don't we start with the basics? Let me start by giving people some context as to where the data's come from. So last year we analyzed just over 650,000 opportunities that represented just under $50 billion worth of pipeline. And that was across 387 of our customers, but also we surveyed for the first time. In fact, we did a survey this year for where we surveyed just over 2,000 CROs and VPs of sales. So that's where the data has been sourced from. That's probably a good place to start. Coming on to your question, I personally don't see this as a problem, a seller problem. We don't. You're absolutely right with the data point. Just 14% of sellers, the lowest number we've ever seen. And you know, Sam and I have been running these reports now for this is the fourth year we've done the report. So with just 14% of sellers responsible for 80% of new logo revenue last year, that's the smallest amount we've ever seen. But in my mind, this isn't a problem for sellers. This is a leadership problem. And so, as leaders, we have a responsibility to make our sellers successful. And we see a stark difference between sales organizations that are very data driven and those that aren't. And we still live in a world where the majority of organizations are not being data driven in the way they run their go-to-market motion, in particular their sales teams. And success. And we can talk a lot more about success as well a little bit later. This was the first time we've really gone deep onto the kind of right-hand side of the bow tie, looking at the data around retention and cross-sell upsell, as well as just new logo attraction. So yeah, we do have a problem, and the problem is inconsistency. We aren't making it easy for our sellers to replicate best practice. And that's leading to all of these inefficiencies that we're seeing in the market. And just getting rid of the bottom third of sellers and replacing them with someone else's bottom third of sellers and expecting to have a different result isn't gonna move the bar.
Interesting. AJ, can you react to that? Would you agree with it or disagree with it?
I mean, I do definitely agree that most sales teams aren't data driven. I think that sticks out to me in spades, and a lot of that.
But is that the problem, right? We're talking not about like, are there issues in the world out there? We're saying, what's the root cause?
I think operational maturity is a symptom that points to the foundation of any strong go-to-market team that is operating with data. Is probably one that is looking at personalities of the sales team, is doing the deeper analysis that's needed to create this world that Guy's talking about in success. So I mean, I think that makes sense. Guy, you said 14% are bringing 80% of the logos. I don't think I caught it. What was the year before? Because you said that went down.
Yeah, the year before was classic 80-20. We saw 80% of revenue come from about 20% of the sellers. So the numbers are being concentrated. And really, what, in my opinion, the main driver behind that is that level of inconsistency. When you go into an organization that's got 100 sellers, they've probably got a dozen or so managers underneath within those sellers. And when you look at the way that they're doing their pipeline inspection and how they're managing their sales cycles, they're all doing it in different ways. Yeah, if you don't have that consistency, you're never going to win.
Well, that's also to answer your question. That's what I see in teams that are performing versus not, where it's like if you have, let's say you have a new product or you have something new to sell to the organization, how easily are they going to take that, align to it, absorb it, be enabled, and just like go run with it and do the thing that they're asked of, versus everyone kind of flailing. You have like a lone wolf behavior on your 14% of your team that know what to do, but no one else can learn from it. So it's really, I honestly have seen this in our own organization where you might have a part of the go to market team performing really well in new business sales, for example, but a different part of your motion, maybe on CS and your renewal motion, isn't at the same level. And you can just like literally see that imbalance that happens to what Guy is talking about. So
Sam,
he's right. Leaders are like the key to
Okay.
whether this is going to be successful or not.
Asad doesn't care anymore. What's the
Yeah, he
next?
doesn't care. Listen, you just cut me off.
Yeah.
You really did.
Okay,
You were like,
Sam,
it wasn't even like you just like, he's like, no.
No, I'm done. Which is kind of funny. I had 3 people, by the way, message me last week, and they're like, "Well, I turned it off, AJ, because you weren't on." I was like, "I was on last week." You're like, "Well, the first 15 minutes you didn't speak at all." So I was like, "Okay, well, here we are this episode."
Did
But
they really
Sam,
turn it off because you weren't on?
yes.
Are these people related to you?
One's my CEO coach. So yes.
Glenn Gao. Glenn's
brother coach.
mentions of him. He's just like, they didn't mention me again.
Yeah.
Stupid podcast.
Yeah, there we are. So Glenn, you get a shout out. Thank you. You don't have to turn this episode off. Sam, love to hear from you.
Sam,
thanks,
let me
AJ.
ask you a specific question on this. Do you agree with this idea that this number is challenged because there's a leadership problem? We need better data. We need more consistency. And if you were to agree with it, then what do you think the upper limit of this is in our ecosystem? Like if we did all these things well, what percent of people are driving 80% of the revenue, or what percent of people are hitting their quotas?
So here's what I think. I think as long as I've been in this business, people have said that there's a Pareto law that's in operation around the number of people that are effectively good sellers. And we had Ben Tago on, or Tago, from Objective Management Group, and we would run these surveys, these assessments that Objective Management Group does. And I was doing those 15 years ago. And I was doing those in 2010. And guess what? It was about the same percentage that qualified for Objective Management's assessment of like what a good seller is, meaning it was about 15% of people that are actually evaluated to be good at sales, and there's still 85% of people that basically do not have the right skill set to be good at it. So is there a leadership problem? Sure. There's always a leadership problem.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a data problem.
There's always a pipeline issue.
Yeah, there's always an adherence problem and a consistency problem. Is it a problem if it's persistent throughout history? It might just be human nature. But I think that something you said last week, Asad, which just rings in my mind, and I really liked it. It was a hot take, and it said you said 90% of people doing any job suck at it. And you were using it to impugn, the role of marketing, because you said it just happens to be the case that in the role of marketing, they have louder megaphones and they complain about it more, but basically they're not very good. And I guess I agree with you. And I think as it relates to salespeople, most people aren't good at sales. Yeah. Sales is really hard. And
I obviously agree with you on this. I think if you look at professions like actors, and you say 1% of actors become very successful, no one's like alarmed by that. They're like, yeah, it makes sense. It's really difficult. If you say sports, like 1 or 2 or 3 or 5% of people that want to play in the major leagues of any major sport make it, you're like, yeah, reasonable. And then when it comes to sales, we tend to think that if we implement the bow tie and have better data and better leadership, much larger percentages of people will perform at this thing. That is not an academic craft. Like sales is, you can't just read a textbook and get a pep talk and go and do well in sales. Sales, you need to have a combination of, you need to study what you have to do. You need to be disciplined about doing those things. But at the same time, there is an X factor in great salespeople. There are characteristics that they're born with, and that are then activated through the life that they live. And without that X factor, a salesperson can't be great. And there's just a very few % of people that have those. Then they have to find the right company with the right product, with the right product, with the right leadership, with the right stage. All these things they have to get right to be able to perform. And when I look at it that way, I'm almost impressed that 20% of people are hitting their numbers. That seems impressive to me. I think these numbers go down over time. If you look out 3 years from now and say there's another 1,000 Series A or Series B companies out there, on average, they have, 10 people in go-to-market in sales. That's 100,000 more salespeople out there that we need. And this community grows at 2% per year from a supply of salesperson perspective. It's not going to happen. These numbers will go down.
Yeah, but Asad, were there more or less sellers in the world last year?
Less.
Okay.
Every year there's more.
Well, what you're saying, I mean, if there was 14% last year versus the 20% the year before, the denominator was smaller last year. So theoretically, what happened to the good sellers then?
What do you mean?
Well, you're saying that the percentage makes sense, but I'm saying like, well, the pool got a lot smaller, but the number of top sellers should have stayed the same, right? So it should have theoretically gone up.
Why would it go up?
Because there's less overall sellers. The ones that were pretty terrible. Well, I mean, you answered it.
I'm saying there's more sellers every year.
I said, is there less sellers last year than there were the year before? And you said there were less
last year than the year before.
Okay, well, you answered it.
Every year, the community gets larger. No matter what, there's more people entering tech every single year across all functions.
I don't know if that's true, though. Were there more sellers?
I track it. It's generally 2% in North America. The tech supply of tech talent increases at 2% per quarter.
And that was true last year, even with Carta's data.
Last year, the year before that.
Yeah. Well, someone fact check that.
Guy, what do you think? What do you think? You're our guest, and we're not even letting you speak.
Well, yeah, you guys can keep arguing if you like, but I've got the data. I can give you some answers if that helps.
That would be great.
So, look, there's a number of different points here. Are there rock star sellers that can smell out the right deal? Absolutely. And our top performers, yes, they're self-sourcing more of their own opportunities. They're qualifying out more opportunities at the discovery stage than anybody else. The pace that they run at each stage of the sales cycle is faster than others. Their conversion rates are better. They build better relationships. They're more multi-threaded, and they have higher win rates. Yes, of course, there are top performers out there that are achieving all of the above. Okay. However, the idea of that we throw our hands up in the air and go, well, there's just some bad sellers out there, we can't do better than this is insane. Okay. There's so much inefficiency in the way sales are operating at the moment. So many different approaches to doing this, and so little data-driven decisions are being made. And in reality, we now live in a world where the data is available, where we're able to understand what those top performers are doing at every stage of every sales cycle, and we can analyze every phone call from the last 12 months. We can analyze every email exchange, every meeting that's taken place. We can start to see how multi-threaded different stakeholders are. We can, in every sales cycle, we can see how many days we spend in stage. We can go back and retrospectively look at the call recordings and see how well or badly people have been qualified. One of the projects we did with a customer recently was looking at a specific set of sellers that were losing a lot of deals at late stage. But when we went back and retrospectively analyzed their gong recordings, we were able to see that they just weren't qualifying customers well enough. So it wasn't a late stage issue, it was an early stage issue. So there is the fundamental thing that's going to save this industry is that even the B players want to win. Okay. And that drive to win means that our responsibility as leaders is to show them how to win. And I'm not talking about holistically, you need to do more or be more multi-threaded. I'm talking about granularity here. I'm talking about very specific gates and triggers that allow the sellers to move from one stage to the next when they achieve certain criteria. And the data already exists within our organizations. The problem is it's just in the wrong place. So if you're living in a world where you don't know how multi-threaded you need to be at each stage of the sales cycle to achieve a certain outcome, if you don't know how much momentum you need with different stakeholders to maximize your chance of winning, then there is no way you're in a place where you can actually help your sellers to achieve a certain outcome. And
I guess the question is, knowing it is important. You should know these things. You should look into them. You should measure everything that is important to measure, all the moments that matter. But does knowing it fits the problem? Because the argument would be that you can know all these things and give this advice and training to substandard salespeople. Will they do it consistently in a disciplined manner?
It's not about the salespeople are not substandard. Okay.
How can you say that? For decades, they haven't been hitting numbers, missing quotas.
For decades, they didn't have the data. They didn't have the visibility. And we got plenty of evidence along this.
Guy, remember Asad's hot take is 90% of us suck out there. So
that's my stance.
Especially all the people.
But that way, if I went on Winning by Design's website, their case study would be a company with bad product market fit that they implemented all this at and the salespeople started flying. Right. Their case studies are companies with great product market fit where they go in and they amplify momentum, but there's rare examples of companies that didn't have that are flying. And what I take from that is it's more about product market fit than anything else, and your ability to concentrate as many of the great people within your organization as possible. None of us are like fixing an industry. We're trying to build great businesses within it. So we're trying to concentrate talent within our organizations. If we take the stance that there's only few great people out there, then we're going to try our best to go and get them. There will be other leaders, and I have sat with these CROs who are like, I don't believe you can hire only great salespeople. You need to be able to have B players and C players in your organization, but none of those companies become generational companies.
I think I'm not going to speak for Guy. He's very capable at speaking for himself, but I will say perhaps the emphasis isn't necessarily that everybody can be a great seller. I think most of the time, the emphasis is, can we take a tier of people that are just, can we take a certain group of C people and make them B people? Can we take a certain group of B people and make them A- people or A people? It's not necessarily that we're going to transform the entire organization, but it is probably true that a couple percentage points of lift in terms of quota production or quota attainment probably dramatically changes the trajectory of specific organizations.
Yeah, but what about the effort to take a C person to B versus B to A?
AJ with a good comeback. I like that.
That amount of effort, really, Sam, does that really equate to like
worth it, Sam?
Is it worth it? Yeah.
I think what a fascinating question in the age of AI. Seriously, ask Kyle Norton what he thinks. He's got these, he's got people in the sim for X amount of hours every week or every day. He's got these AI generated role plays that are quite compelling, that are probably very, very good. They're only going to get better. So the amount of real world training that an effective account executive can get is probably 10 times what was possible given the bandwidth constraints of a specific and span of control of a manager a couple of years ago. So I think fundamentally, to your point, like, are there a group of people that are, because I do think it relates to ambition, Asad, and to, growth mindset, like people that want to learn. And are there a group of people that want to learn? Maybe they don't want to learn as much as Asad does or AJ did. Maybe they're not like top tier entrepreneurial people, but maybe they just need a little bit of help. And maybe if they got a little bit more help, they could be much more productive for the organization. I think that's probably true. I probably believe that.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Kyle, I have a friend that's going through an owner interview process, and it is insanely intense.
It's basically concentration of talent. Like, he's taking the concentration approach where he's saying, we now have product market fit. I'm one of the greatest in the world right now. I should be able to hire a much higher percent of A players than the average company out there. And he's trying to get all of them, and they want to work for him because he'll put them through this strenuous regimented process to help them actualize their fullest potential. So it's really interesting because the great people don't get dispersed on average across the ecosystem. They get concentrated within organizations, and everybody else gets left with kind of the rest. And that's a really interesting dynamic within these organizations. Guy, there was another point here that was really interesting.
I'm just laughing because basically what I heard was Kyle gets the 10%, you all get the 90%. So good luck with that.
Fair way to think about it.
I'm completely on the different page.
Okay, let's get it.
We saw we took a PE-backed business last year, and again, I absolutely buy into the principle. You need to see that 20% of the reps are consistently hitting quota within an organization, because that tells us you've got product market fit. But when I tell you that the RevOps team within this business, again, about 100 sellers, they've been banging the drum about everything we've been talking about for years, but they couldn't get buy-in from the leadership, and by default, they couldn't get buy-in from the sellers on the ground. And so when we did the analysis and we took it and we turned it into pictures, suddenly the penny drops. Suddenly now you're saying to the sellers, look, you've got a win rate of 12%, but on average you're engaging with 3 stakeholders. But look, when we get 6 or more stakeholders actively engaged by stage 2, and one of them is a finance persona with an engagement above 67, our win rates are 38%. And when you show it to them in that kind of picture format, suddenly the penny drops. Now they understand why you're asking them to be multi-threaded. Now they understand why you're asking them to engage with the finance persona at stage 2 instead of stage 4. And when you show it to these sellers, because they want to win, because the only thing we need good sellers to have is that drive to win. When you take away all the distraction, and AI is a fantastic set of tools that you can use to get rid of those distractions, because it's great at all the stuff that sellers aren't good at. But what AI is really bad at is building relationships with our customers and prospects. And when you show the sellers, look, this is how you get to 38% win rate. If you break it down into the individual stages, and again, this customer had stages moving around all over the place, and they had no disciplines, no structure. And in less than a year, win rates went up by 87%. We reduced sales cycles by 21%. And they increased multi-threading on their deals by 1/3. And this isn't a coincidence. It's just about putting in a consistent process and using evidence to encourage the team to go along in a consistent format. And most importantly, to do their pipeline inspection in a consistent format. No bullshit around, oh, they love me, they're definitely going to buy, they think we're great. I don't care about any of that. I just need to know that we've all agreed we're not leaving stage 2 until we've got 6 stakeholders bought in, including a finance persona. Where are we at? Because if you haven't got them, or we've agreed to use MedPick as our qualification methodology, and you need a qualification of 8 or above, or we're not allowed to leave this discovery stage. And so by having these rules in place, by having the data-driven insights, you can get 80% of your sellers hitting 80% of quota.
80%?
80% of
That's
sellers
not true.
can hit 80% of quota. No, I'm not saying they're all going to hit quota.
Oh.
But you can get 80% of your sellers hitting 80% of their quota.
Okay. That's
Probably your team can be a B,
And that's
like they can perform
revolutionary.
at a B level. That's interesting.
And it's revolutionary because all of a sudden we need to be able to scale our businesses with B players. We have to. We cannot rely
I don't
on
know
this
about that.
mythical
Like,
A
I think
player
this
to
is
scale
the
our
thing that-
organizations.
But why do we have to believe that? Because if we believe it, then that's the only thing that'll ever happen. Like, I think you can believe that you can have a company that is predominantly of A players. Like, I think that's an important thing to hope and want.
I mean,
Then you get left with at least some A players if you go for that. Like, I think if you aim on average for B, you probably land up under that.
there's a lot of companies, Amazon, Microsoft, that do these stack rankings, Oracle, and they have for years. And there's a lot of controversy around this idea of doing it. I think at a startup, I think it's actually prudent for the founder, CEO to like constantly in their mind stack rank their A players. And I mean, there was someone on my management team, he's still with us, he'll listen to this episode and know who he is, said, AJ, you can't possibly ask for all A players at your company. I almost fired him on the spot for that comment because it just is like totally disagree with that 100%. And I think, but here's the thing, and Asad and I actually were talking about this the other day. You can go through a whole interview process, hire what you think is an A player. If you know that they're not an A player pretty quickly, you need to move on. Especially if they're on your executive team. But I just mean more
that
generally.
should be fired in 30 days.
30 days. You ask it's that question of would I hire this person again 30 days after? And the answer is no, you need to move on.
Because if you don't see it in 30 days, you're now hoping that they grow into who you thought you hired. And that's not the bet you were making. You were not hiring this person to grow into some version of themselves that you were hoping for. You were hiring the person assuming they are something that they ended up not being. I think 30 days is like more than enough to know.
I still disagree with Asad's 90% of us suck out there. It's still not true. But look, Guy, I think your point is valid, but it feels aspirational, frankly, in what you're saying. And I know you have the data to prove that because of what we're saying here. 14% of you're like, talk about bow ties. You're talking about one side of the bow tie, and most of the organizations you work with are on the other side of the bow tie. So how do you square that?
What do you mean, AJ?
He's saying 14% are carrying the new logos for the data that he has. I'm assuming your customers, And the other side of it should be aspirationally, we're like 80% are hitting 80% attainment if they're doing these things, and you're trying to get everyone to do those things. Why are they not doing those things?
Well, first of all, the survey, the data in the report comes not just from our 387 customers, but also from 2,000 other CROs that we've interviewed and analysed their data.
They're the ones that suck.
Or I suppose at a minimum, can we at least all agree that if we can introduce consistency in the way that we do our pipeline inspections, in the way that we run our sales cycles, irrelevant of who the manager and the rep and the seller happens to be, but if everybody's doing things in a consistent format, if we know what good looks like, if we don't allow rogue sellers to go off and do things in different ways, but we keep to a very structured process that we know works and maximizes our win rates, we're going to get better results.
Yes, I would agree.
I think we can agree with that.
I agree with that.
You and I agree with that.
Being data-driven.
And Asad has made it his goal to disagree with everything that is said in this conversation today.
In most conversations. Okay, so this one was really interesting. Yeah, if you guys don't mind. 46% of businesses adopted a full sales cycle approach for their AEs. This entails them prospecting, closing, and managing expansion in the first 12 months. My question is, I've seen this shift as well. Like, this is a real shift that happened over the last couple of years.
Careful what I said. You might agree with me for a minute.
Maybe. Let's see. The quotas didn't necessarily go
The
down.
way he said that, he said he's not going to agree with it. He has intent on not agreeing with you.
The quotas didn't necessarily go down, but we gave these people so much more responsibility. And is that part of why so few are hitting their numbers? Like, the job is now overwhelming in terms of a capacity perspective. Your ability to get good at any one of those things is much harder. Like, I don't believe that AEs shouldn't prospect, but I believe that when you're having them do all of their prospecting, it means that you can't justify a lead gen function. It's not efficiently possible for you. That's not a great sign for an organization. And then these AEs, I find that the great ones will just never take those roles. Why would they? It sounds like a horrible position. And so the downstream of this would be that there will be less quota attainment, less skill development, etc. What are your general thoughts on this? Like, is this a good thing or a bad thing?
So there's a lot there. So let me start by addressing the first assumption. One of the reasons I think the numbers are so disparate for last year is because there was so much churn. We saw about 30% churn of sales staff last year. And the process of churning the old, getting rid of the crap pipeline, bringing you in, and then training those up and getting them really operational, actually delivering results, I think had a big impact on the numbers from last year. So I think that's probably worth considering. When we talk about 360 sales people, or people take full cycle sales people, again, I want to clarify a couple of points. I'm not suggesting that they are solely responsible for lead generation. I'm also not suggesting that they are solely responsible for looking after their customers once they've signed the contracts.
Okay.
But what we saw is when I first entered sales, I was responsible for what we now call full cycle selling, right? And then everything became specialized. And I think Salesforce drove us down this road. And the theory was great because you'd have these single purpose vehicles that were excellent at very specific parts of the sales cycle. And I love the idea of it. But in reality, more often than not, it wasn't a great customer experience. You would build enough trust with somebody to sign a contract, only to be then handed over to somebody who you've never met before. And so I think what we found was that there was a lot of customers were falling through the cracks and they weren't getting the service that they were looking for. When you add to that when you are self-sourcing your own opportunities, you get a better conversion rates. And the first 6, 9, 12 months of a customer being on board is the most likely time for a cross-sell, upsell opportunity. Suddenly it makes a lot of sense to allow the person who's built that trust with the customer to maintain some level of contact. And it reduces that problem of look, I trust you, I'm going to sign a contract with you, don't worry, you're in safe hands, I'm going to hold on to you for a period of time once the contract's done. And if you ask me, my gut feel is when we look at that number next year, it will be higher than that.
Yeah.
That's surprising. I would be surprised if it's higher than that. But I'm just seeing for our own team, our CS team, we did this. We combined onboarding and renewals, and that was a mistake. So we're kind of winding back the clock a little bit on it, but it does make sense.
What was the mistake, AJ?
Because our product became more specialized for the mid-market, it got more complex, and handling both onboarding, renewals, and upsells meant that you were spending 80% of your time on onboarding and not the strategic lever on consulting with mid-market customers.
So now who handles expansion and who does renewals?
The more classic account management, and then a CS team that handles more the like onboarding day to day of the account.
Interesting.
But the thing that I thought about when I was reading this stat is just this like classic shrinkflation. It's like, we're just gonna keep your OTs the same, but we're gonna give you more, but we won't tell it to you. It's like a Hershey bar getting smaller over time, and then all of a sudden, when people do wake up and realize that, like, oh, we're just doing more with less, and maybe they won't, then it becomes an issue.
But this one sounds like a positive thing, because even when we
Really?
were in ZERP, so let me qualify that. In ZERP, like in the worst moment in time in terms of efficiency and best practices, the very best CROs were very diligent about making sure their reps were prospecting, some prospecting at least.
Sure.
Right? So some level of prospecting in the best sales orgs has historically been the case. There were many companies that had gone away from that, but the best was still doing it. So I think it's a good practice for reps, even at the enterprise level, to do some level of prospecting. Most of our clients, like I can't think of in the last 5 years any upper mid-market or enterprise level roles that we've filled that the AE wasn't involved in expansion for the first 12 months either. So that's always been a best practice. If you're selling something complicated, you don't start small and get big. And so there is going to be a hold period that you have. So to be able to get the actual first year value out of that, and then you move it over to account management. I think these are like positive things that salespeople should be involved in. I don't think we should go back to what used to be called the island model in sales, where you did 100% of your prospecting and 100% of your account management. That was when we sold perpetual licenses. And the assembly line of SaaS has created more enterprise value than that old model did. So it is the better model. We just overextended.
I think you're spot on, Asad. And actually, by freeing up the seller to not have to get the whole deal in the first signature, actually you can get the deals done faster, and because the seller will continue to earn money as the opportunities arise through the initial implementation and rollout and activation and so on. And I think, but on AJ's point, I think that's valid too. You still want specialists responsible for the technical implementation and the customer being activated. I'm talking specifically around the relationship, owning that relationship, being that point of escalation. You know, I trusted you, I signed the contract, I've got a problem, I want to come back to you. And I think, and actually, the customer quite likes the fact that, okay, we're going to have another commercial conversation. The CS team have identified an opportunity here, or you know, it looks like you need some more licenses or a new feature. I get brought in because I'm the person who discussed the commercials with you, but ultimately I'm not in the weeds dealing with the implementation necessarily. So I think I think the customer likes it because they get consistency. The seller likes it because they can eat the elephant in one bite at a time, or one sitting at a time. And I think it delivers better results for everybody.
I think so too. This is an area I've changed my mind on, actually. I'd read that paper by Winning by Design on customer success as a profit center, and their thesis over there was that customer success should own expansion and upselling and renewals. And I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've changed my mind about that. It doesn't work. You know, CS is mostly people that couldn't make it in sales. They go into CS.
Wow.
Man, he's not looking for friends.
Can I just officially state
He's not.
Asad
He
does
has
not
enough
represent
friends. He doesn't want any more.
Hey, Asad, what do you think of partnership people? Also couldn't cut it in sales?
Okay, as we come towards the last part of this, Guy, there was some uplifting data about the start of the year. 2025, obviously, I'm assuming was some portion of Q1 is what you guys were measuring over there. And there was this enthusiasm that we all had coming into 2025. 2024 felt a lot more stable than the previous year, especially the second half of it. And there was a lot of reasons to believe 2025 will be a good year for the ecosystem from a bunch of different angles: IPOs, liquidity, demand, et cetera, et cetera. And it started off well for most people that I've spoken to, but then now here we are, right? And volatility is the name of the game again. So there was some interesting signals, like win rates were up 19%, deal values were up 54%, expansion win rates were up 45%. Now that the volatility is here, you guys have been measuring this data for quite a few years, so you know what happens to some of these numbers when volatility increases. Tell us what might play out in these areas over the course of this year if volatility remains? Assume that volatility remains.
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be wealthy, a lot wealthier than I am right now. But look, I can say with confidence that towards the end of last year and beginning of this year, it certainly felt like we hit bottom and are coming back up. Average deal values went up by 54%. So there's been a lot more focus on larger opportunities. People seem to be moving mid-markets. And we can see that time to close is shortening as well. So average number of stakeholders involved in the sales process is reducing. So the buying committee is getting smaller as well. So there are a lot of good signs out there, and there's a lot of signals that tell us that the sales and marketing engine are working a lot closer together than ever before. So yes, I think there's a lot of really positive signals in there. I think we've seen this play out before, right? This isn't our first rodeo. We know that there'll be winners and losers, during any sort of volatility. And again, in my opinion, the answer to all of this is to become a lot more data driven and a lot more consistent in the way we go to market together. And really try and understand what good looks like at every stage. Really get under the skin of what works and be diligent about monitoring the right things, and be consistent in your approach, because you can have a big impact. And the biggest challenge that a lot of organizations have is knowing when to close deals off as lost. We went into an organization recently, when deals had slipped more than 180 days, their win rates were down at like 2%. And they had over 250 deals that matched that criteria. And you're just thinking, what the hell are you doing? Because they didn't understand the impact of time on win rates for that organization. They didn't know.
What they're doing is they're scared to close loss because they probably don't have enough top of the funnel. So once they close 250 deals, they're like, well, what do we have left? Nothing. And then they're like, well, where's the pipeline coming from? It's like, well, I'll call all the people that I just closed loss.
It's a winning formula, tried and true.
It works.
That's like a Ponzi scheme.
It works 0% of the
Tale
time.
as old as
100% of the time.
The truth will set us all free, right? We need to know the data. We need to understand, how many days we spend in stage when we win versus when we lose. We need to understand which opportunities certain sellers are better at selling to than others, so that we can funnel the right leads to the right people. We need to get much better at qualification, much more consistency in, the amount of opportunities we see that people skip through that discovery stage and then invest huge amounts of resources in selling to someone who ultimately may not even be able to buy. We need to get much better and much more professional, and that is a leadership challenge. We need to help our sellers be much more consistent in the way they go to market, and show them the data, help them understand that when you get past a certain number of days, or if you can't get buy-in or a commitment to meet with certain stakeholders, this isn't real. Let's close it off and spend our time on something more productive, because even with a win rate of 19%, that still says that we're spending over 80% of our time on opportunities that are never going to generate any revenue.
What do you think,
any other
Guy?
industry that wouldn't be acceptable?
I don't want to say his name in case there's any sensitivity around it, but you brought in a great sales leader over the last year or two. What was the impact there? Because I remember you telling me that, just to the point of like, what is the impact of leadership? What is the impact of like frontline management and people that really understand how to drive revenue? What was the impact inside the Ebsta organization? It was pretty dramatic, wasn't it?
Yeah, game changing. So we would sell to anyone who would come and talk to us. We're a small business. We play in a big market, and Ebsta works just as well for HubSpot CRM as it does for Salesforce CRM. So, but the changes that we've made, unless someone comes inbound and actively knocks on our door, we won't sell to customers using HubSpot CRM anymore because they're too small. Our average deal values have gone. 2 years ago, our average deal values were less than $5,000 a customer. Last year, we ended at 28,800. We finished our first half at 56,000 average deal value. So that's come from focus. That's come from data and focus and turning away more than we work on. And now the impact on the pipeline is it grew dramatically, but it took slightly longer to close those deals. So we had to stand by our guns. But now we've got a revenue engine that's much more focused on ICP. And will not accept any opportunities that are not real, and will consistently look to close deals off as lost as soon as we possibly can, and get on something more productive. So
that's the impact of leadership.
Cool.
To the
we
point.
grew 68% last year.
Yeah.
Well, that's more than Pavilion, so maybe you can run Pavilion.
That's really dramatic. I guess that's product market fit in a way, right? Like you guys were able to lock in on exactly where we have great product market fit, and now let's do all these things in a disciplined manner that helps us maximize the probability of winning, and makes a lot of sense.
If the sellers' experience through their inspection meetings with their managers are different depending on who the manager is, if you don't have that visibility of the benchmarks of what good looks like, if you've got people skipping stages, if you don't know what your win rates are or how many days you should be in stage when you win versus when you lose, if you don't have this data, you're not even at the races. And RevOps is like going to the gym. It's not a one and done, right? It's an incremental improvement as you go. And every quarter you pick a project and you get really good at it, and then you solve the next challenge and the next one. But the impact is dramatic, not just on revenue and growth, but ultimately on valuation of your business. You take a business that's growing at 12%, you get it to 30% growth. You can imagine the impact that has on valuation.
Did you keep all the same salespeople, but the changes were these other changes? Salespeople were the same.
Yeah, they're all really good. I'm proud of the team we've got. Yeah. But what changed it for us was leadership and structure and turning away more things than we opened up.
I love that. Well done.
Yeah.
Last question before we. I mean, it feels like we're in a closing moment. I don't know. Asad will tell us, but Guy. So to the point of you're monitoring all this data. And the place I thought Asad's question was going is we had a strong start to the year, but we've hit all this uncertainty. What's the outlook for the rest of the year? I don't know if, I guess what I would say is that what I've seen from the Pulse data that Pavilion does is that a lot of people have indicated, we asked this question, what % of people have changed their 2025 revenue forecast? And the answer was 45%. I think that they were not answering, that was not like, we went to the board and lowered the number and got the board to approve the plan. I think what they're saying is they internally think that it's not going to be as good as they thought. What are you saying in the data? Are you seeing falling win rates? Are you seeing extended sales cycles? Is it too early to tell? Just curious what the platform is indicating to you.
Pockets is the short answer. Extremes all over the place. And really, unfortunately, I can't give you a really clean answer to that question, but I think that for the listeners coming in, this stuff isn't hard, but there aren't any shortcuts, right? If you want to build a data-driven machine for your go-to-market motion, you need good quality, consistent, maintained, up-to-date data. You need to convert that data into insights in a consistent format, so you know what's actually going on. You then need to use those insights to build your benchmarks, and then you need consistency through technology and in the way that in the way you do your inspections and your pipeline and your forecasting. And then ultimately, the final piece of the puzzle is a change agent. If you've got RevOps in your business, great, but is it really RevOps? Are they strategic or are they sales admins? And whether you need an external supplier or internal a guru who's going to drive the change, you do need a change agent involved. So this stuff isn't hard, but if you skip a stage, if you don't solve the data issues, if you don't build the benchmarks, if you don't have a consistent platform to do this stuff on, if you don't have a change agent, you won't achieve the outcomes you're aiming for. So control the controllables, focus your energy on the things that you can do different and that you can introduce consistency for. The world around us is going to be what it's going to be, is, I suppose, my view on things.
Well, Guy, welcome to Top Line, where Asad's idea of the perfect organization is a chief product officer that was a former BDR in a previous life. All sales, all the time. No, I'm one.
Are you saying Wyndham was a former BDR?
Actually, he was a former RevOps leader, which cool. I know, just really is. Asad saw that and he's like, "You can't hire Wyndham." I'm just kidding.
You still not looked up who Wyndham Earl is, AJ?
Wyndham Earl is he's a mustard entrepreneur, right? He created the famous. Who's Wyndham Earl?
He's the villain in Twin Peaks. He's
Agent
Cooper's arch nemesis.
Yeah.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
Well,
another non-viral moment for
we did it. Good job. Clip that one. Put it on the gram. Great job.
This one's got it. This obscure Twin Peaks
I
reference.
will tell you, Sam, that AJ beat me to Wyndham. I'm a huge fan of Wyndham's. He's
Oh, really?
one of the most talented product people I've ever worked with. And,
Oh, that's great. I love to hear that.
Massive fan of Wyndham's, and if
He's
AJ
been
had
awesome.
we would have pushed for him.
So we have
He's been a
50
game
minutes
changer.
in. Guys, stick around, like to hang out with us till the end of this episode. So we're going to pivot into a different area where I'm actually very curious to get guys' perspective as well.
Are you a B2B tech CRO, VP of Sales, or VP of Revenue Operations? Join over 200 of your peers at CRO Summit 2025, a one-day executive-only event designed to help you tackle the challenges of today and position you for growth tomorrow. Hosted at the Denver Art Museum, this summit combines cutting-edge insights and actionable strategies. Learn from industry pioneers covering all aspects of sales and revenue growth into 2026 with sessions from Andrea Kayal of Help Scout, Guy Rubin of Ebsta, Wendy Sturgis of Cleverbridge, and more. Visit joinpavilion.com/CRO-summit to secure your spot today.
So we've got this really interesting issue playing out in the market. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed the 11x situation where this company was kind of fudging their numbers. They were quoting customers who'd maybe done a trial with them and hadn't signed on, but they were like, look, this is our customer. And TechCrunch had written about it, and there was all this negative press that came out of that situation. Initially, the board came out in support of the CEO, but yesterday the CEO stepped down. And he did the classic, I'm not stepping down, I'm stepping up into the executive chair, and this is fantastic. But he was obviously pushed out. Then you've got on the other side, you've got this Deal and Rippling thing, which is Deal has been caught having placed a spy within Rippling. It's clean and clear that that was the case. The guy admitted to the scenario. The CEO has run away to Dubai because they don't have any extradition over there. But A16Z has come out in complete support of Deal over here. A16Z, for those who might not know, were responsible for pushing Parker Conrad out of Zenefits when the Zenefits situation happened a long time ago. They took a massive brand hit for being considered not founder friendly. And this is them trying to show the world we're now founder friendly. But A16Z was also in 11x. And so now it's strange. Like, what is founder friendliness? Like over here, you're supporting somebody who has done something genuinely sketchy, but you've pushed out this other person. AJ, what do you think is founder friendliness stage based? That if you're a multi-billion-dollar business, we'll back you a lot more than if you're a Series A or Series B. If you screw around, we'll throw you out. Is that what it is?
No.
It's not stage based at all. I think, in fact, we looked at the data on our early stage investor at Trendkite, and 97% of their portcos had a different CEO than the one when they invested. That was seed stage.
What?
Yeah. And so,
was it a good seed fund? Like, did they ever return?
It's a good seed fund. You
Really?
all can go look it up. I'm not going to call them out on it.
How can it be good if every company they invested in required a CEO to be thrown out?
We found out that our other later stage, it was our Series A investor, had in their LP charter that one of their goals was to replace founders with executive CEOs.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So this is a very common thing that's not very well known in the industry. Yeah, in their LP agreement.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And how big is this fund?
It was probably $400-500 million fund.
Oof. What
is A16Z is really standing stoutly behind this Deal guy.
Yeah, they are. There was a whole article on the information about it. They've come out in complete support.
Yeah, I wonder if that's more. I honestly wonder if that's more of like a political shift, like a vibe shift. I don't know. Mark Andreessen's come out like in favor of like teaching kids how to street fight and, Krav Maga. And, he's a big time, like there's this whole rightward shift. And I just wonder if maybe some of like their morality is less important to them. And maybe they're just like trying to embrace. What's that?
A little bit of bad boy behavior is tolerated now more than before.
Well, it was just like a year ago where David Sachs was like thrown under the bus by like Reid Hoffman or someone because of the founder of Napster, Seth, or someone came out and said like, I have the receipts.
Parker Conrad. It was Parker.
Oh, Parker Conrad. Yeah, Parker
He
Conrad.
was saying that Sachs is the reason that he got pushed out of Zenefits.
Yeah. So there's it doesn't get talked about, but sometimes you see a little bit of a burst. It's a pretty known thing that you really have to understand the fund that you're looking for, that you're working at. And frankly, when there's either a lot of money at the table, it's a risk. They're just like, yeah, unfortunately, founder CEO. Snowflake was a good example of this, where those founders were all they came from Microsoft, very tech heavy, product heavy, and needed someone to like Frank Slootman to come in and like really change
Sutter Hill had
Sutter Hill,
incubated Snowflake, and the founder of the managing partner of Sutter Hill was essentially the CEO. Then they brought in the guy that just screwed up Nike, and then they threw out that guy and brought in Frank Slootman.
But I thought there was a founder in there that was like the interim CEO, but like was trying to play. Okay, well, it's revisionist history on my part. Asad's telling the true story.
Fantastic research.
Great research on my end.
So when a founder comes to you, there was this moment in time where you could have shares that had more votes than every other person on your board and in your company. Snapchat had this, Mark Zuckerberg had this. If you're advising a founder, AJ, is that possible?
That's called FF stock. Yeah, that's actually legitimately. I know a few founders that have done it this way for this very reason. They're usually second-time founders. The data on that is probably not super clear. My sense is that you're going to get a lot of friction up front, but if you can get through the first few rounds, then the investor's investing in the company, and they're like, at the end of the day, they're like, okay, well, it got to this scale.
If you can get through seed or Series A, you're good with that.
I've had a friend who, as a part of a term sheet, like he didn't know this, the term sheet was you're being replaced as CEO if you sign this, and it was like an insight. He didn't really have a choice, but he was like, no, I'm figuring it out. And they ended up selling for like 5x their last round. After, and just saying, no, we're not doing this deal. I'm going to figure it out. So I've seen that too.
Guy, what do you think?
I don't think, I think the money doesn't care. I think the money wants performance. And if you can consistently perform, the money will continue to allow you to run the business. And I think it's quite a blunt tool. Frankly, I think it's one of the few tools that these investors have.
I think it's it's sometimes the only tool, a hammer nail.
Nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and therefore, by definition, it's what they do. You bring money into a business from a VC. There's a more than likely chance that they're going to replace the CEO.
I think you nailed it in the fact that if you look at the difference between 11X and Deal is a performant company. It's killing it, like undeniably killing it. Whereas 11X, the whole saga was that they were saying they were doing better than they were really doing. And so over there, it's like, off you go. Over here, it's like, do we want to change this person? He is kind of flying. He made this mistake, but the business is flying. Can we make this work?
We were hearing stories like 11X in spades during ZERP, though, remember? You had Bolt, Checkout, FTX in some ways. Like you had, every week there was another, like, what was the guy in Austin that locked himself in his office? The CEO of some company locked himself in the office and the FBI had to be called. There's ridiculous stories. And we talked about them at the time, but when these comes around, you're like, oh, and I said this in a previous episode. Remember, I was like, actually, the deal rippling situation kind of feels like that's a good thing. That shows signs that there's like a very competitive nature in the market in a good way.
Looking for the right light.
True.
I do wonder how often the replaced CEO is more successful. I think just because they've ripped and replaced the CEO doesn't necessarily instill confidence in the leadership team or the.
I would say it's less.
We don't have data. Do we have data on that? I don't even know.
Yeah, we could find that. Let's do that. We're gonna come back to you all.
I would say more enterprise value has been created by non-founder CEOs than founder CEOs.
What'd you say, Asad?
There's more enterprise value that's been created in tech, in the tech ecosystem by non-founder CEOs than founder CEOs. That data we have.
You do have that? That doesn't sound
look at
true.
the public companies. Other than one of them, everybody is run by non-founder CEOs.
Well, today, but you're talking about Amazon
but
as a
like
non-founder,
enterprise
or
value that
Microsoft.
the founder created ends when the founder backs out, right? And then so Gates, he created the amount of enterprise value till the point where he was no longer the CEO. Now the next person comes in, and the delta between that and today is the next person's game, right? So Tim
It's got to
Cook has
be
created
proportional. Like, are you saying gross dollars, or are you saying
Yeah.
percentage growth?
gross dollars. Like if you look
Yeah.
at the
I don't think
amount
that's the
of
right measure, but
like Apple, Tim Cook has created more actual enterprise value from a market cap perspective for Apple than Jobs did. Jobs obviously legend, my favorite.
is it percentage? I mean, if you look at where Apple was relative to when Jobs passed away, like I bet the percentage growth is much different than when Tim Cook took over. And you might say, well, who really cares? It's just every dollar is the same. I would probably say the platform creation is more important than the platform extension. So I would say, like, if we're not counting Google because Larry and Sergey don't officially run it, if we're not counting Microsoft because Satya runs it and Bill Gates doesn't run it, if we're not counting Apple because Tim Cook runs it, then yeah, I mean, but I do, so then you're really only looking at this point. I guess you're looking at Meta as the only like major, and maybe NVIDIA.
I think the skill set required to turn zeros into ones is a very specific skill set. And I think the skill set required to scale is a very different set of skills. And I think the idea that a founder has both is quite rare.
Well, and the ones that have like realized this, Larry and Sergey, is a good example of bringing in another operator. WordPress, Matt, what's his last name? Well, he brought in a CEO in the early days as well, but he's taken back over the company in the last like 3 or 4 years.
There was a period of time where in the ecosystem, it was standard that you would replace the founder CEO, right? Like these were hardware companies. They were very expensive to build out. There was a lot of supply chain and operational burden. So if you look at the first 10, 20, 30 companies that Sequoia maybe funded, almost always they would have to replace bring somebody in who was a professional CEO into these organizations. That shifted. Like there's a shift in terms of when you make that change. There comes now a natural point in the company's journey where that change happens, but it's much later. In the best case scenario, it happens much later, almost as late as possible, whereas before it used to be very early. Okay. Well,
what are we doing? Shout outs?
Did we do it?
Wins of the week? Are we doing a question? How are we ending?
We should do shout outs. Whenever we have a guest, we should do a shout out and something that they have been reading or listening to.
Oh, that's good.
Inspiring.
Guy, give us a shout out, something you've been reading, listening to, or a person that's influenced you.
Wow. Thanks for the heads up, guys. Sam is my big influencer, so a big shout out to Sam.
Sam got a shout out last week from our guest. I
got a great shout out last week.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I'm in my mind, we're a small business in a very big space, and the nature of community that I've learned through the work that Sam's done and access with what's been created with Pavilion has changed our lives, and I've personally got a load of value from Pavilion and the community itself. And it doesn't matter where I travel to in the world, there's always a friendly Pavilion face, and normally there's a dinner going on somewhere. So for me, I'm leaning into community more and more, and Pavilion to me is the pinnacle of that. So thank you, Sam.
You're welcome, Guy. AJ, what about you?
I don't know.
Really upset AJ there by
yeah. Here I am trying to think of it. Asad's got one at the top of his mind right now. I can see it.
Sure.
You're gonna have to go.
Absolutely.
For it,
I've been every now and then I kind of find myself in these little tracks of our ecosystem, looking at companies that are doing interesting things within a particular space. Media is something I've been thinking about a lot. And there's just two companies that have really inspired me recently. One is the Free Press and the other is Pirate Wires. And media is a tough place to build. It's a really tough place to build. And I think it takes a lot of guts to go and build a media company, much less than, to build an AI company. So the fact that these people decided to build it, and then the actual unique point of view that shows up in almost any aspect of what they're doing, it feels unique. It feels like it's built through a first principles based approach to thinking about what the market needs and what place we want to play in this world. And it's just beautiful. Like, they've built beautiful businesses. They're both relatively earlier stage in their journeys in the grand scheme of things, but they're quite beautiful businesses and inspired me a fair bit. So people should go check it out and subscribe and give them some money.
That's cool. I'm going to shout out Kyle Bazzi. He is a Pavilion member. He's based in Detroit. And we got on the phone, and he was just talking about the impact that Pavilion's had on his life, and he sort of did it all right. And he introduced himself in the welcome channel and got a flood of inquiries and inbounds. And then he took CRO school. It was just like the perfect formula. And now he's going to be our Detroit chapter head. And it was just like when the formula works really, really well, it's really inspiring to see. And I'm going to shout out, that when you're listening to this, it'll be in the past, but this week I'll be at the ChargeBee conference, and I really appreciate the support that Ash Lomberg in Amsterdam and Guy Marion, their CMO based in Dublin, are showing Pavilion and me for the opportunity to speak about profitable, efficient growth. And I'm also going to be at the SIM conference in Porto, Portugal on Friday, talking about, does kindness have a place in business today? And, is my book still relevant? And, the short answer to that question is probably not. And I've decided that it's every man for himself or every woman for himself.
That's because 90% of you suck out there. That's why.
You got to get them before they get you. That's my basic life message. You got to get them before they get you.
The sequel to that first book is going to be brilliant.
Oh, it's great. Well, the subtitle to the first book is Kind Folks Finish First in a ZERP Environment. When money, it's easy to be nice. Thank you, Guy. Sorry for all of the mishigas of my co-host, but we loved having you on the show, and thanks for the research report.
Thank you so much. And anyone who wants to download it can download it for free, either at Pavilion or Ebsta.com. There's a banner at the top of the screen. And yeah, love the feedback. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, they're welcome to. Just mention the podcast and I'll definitely accept the invite. So look forward to keeping the conversation going and be data driven.
There are a lot of reports that come out in our ecosystem, usually to capture MQLs. The intellectual honesty with which Ebsta puts this report together has always shown up in the way it's put together and the information that's in it, how transparent the data is, how well thought out the statistically relevant aspect of all of this is. I read almost every report that comes out, and this is the one that has always stood out as one that you can actually trust the data within it and think about things really because of that. So we really do appreciate you guys doing this work.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for the feedback, and thanks to the community for supporting.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Top Line. New episodes come out every Sunday. If you like what you heard today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to join our Top Line Slack channel to connect with us and discuss the topics we cover with other listeners. Click the link in the show notes. Lastly, if you're interested in joining Pavilion, you can learn more about membership at joinpavilion.com/membership. Thanks again for listening.